Disclaimer. Any of the guidance offered by the podcast host, myself, or the podcast guests is our own guidance. We are not liable for any of the actions the podcast listener decides to do. Welcome back to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast with me, Johnny Pardo. And today I welcome Evan Marks to the show. And I'm really excited about our conversation around his Mind First coaching, his M1 performance group, and all the things we're going to be talking about from Evan's experience and what he's doing in the world. So just a quick introduction to Evan. So after 20 plus years on the Wall Street, Evan founded M1 to fill a crucial gap, the psychological and emotional training that most traders never receive but desperately need. His work combines neuroscience, psychoanalysis, and practical performance frameworks to help high-level operators make better decisions under pressure. Evan's insights are now reaching even broader audiences. Well, welcome to the show today, Evan. Glad to have you on.
Johnny, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And yeah, we were just saying before the show, I was just saying to Evan, I can tell he's a man who loves what he's doing, and he's doing so many things at the moment. He's just done a TED talk. He loves writing. He's writing books. Just going out there and making an impact on people. So yeah, I could just tell you're a man who's very driven to help people with their performance. So yeah, I'd love to know, from this kind of journey on like Wall Street, what got you interested in all this like psychological and emotional work?
You know, it's interesting. I'm 53 years old and I've been coaching now over almost 8.5 years. And I went to school at University of Pennsylvania, which is a known incubator for Wall Street. And early on, you're motivated by money, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But then it came a point in my life where there was definitely a moment in time where everything shifted. I was 46 years old and I thought I had a heart attack, and it actually was a massive panic attack. And I really, in that moment, had to shift gears and change careers. And ironically, I always wanted to be a teacher and a coach. I just went to a school that was an incubator and everybody was doing it, so I had to follow suit. And it was almost like regret caught up with me. And in that moment, I had such a wonderful opportunity to shift courses, take a massive haircut, unfortunately, but sometimes that's what you have to do. And that motivation by, being motivated by money now is being motivated by impact. To me, the greatest success is success in others. And it's really shifted. I have 2 daughters now. I live in the suburbs. I lived in the city for a long time in Manhattan. And I had an opportunity to go back to school at 46 to take classes in psychoanalytical theory and neuroscience and start coaching about how does the mind really perform. And it's, being a Wall Street guy as a hedge fund PM for a long time, you realize the mental game is 95% of everything. And I really started to be so consumed by this. And now it's 8.5 years later, and I have the opportunity to work with athletes, C-suite executive founders, and obviously Wall Street professionals. And it's been a real gift. And my wife keeps asking me how long am I going to be doing this for? And I keep telling her it's the first inning. I think I drive her nuts. You know what it is? You just get motivated by people doing well. When they start to figure out how to build a strong mental foundation and what it can do for them and how they can leverage that, there's nothing better in the world. When you see people eyes open up to possibility. And, we always say at M1, we have a simple formula that performance equals potential minus interferences. And when people start to understand their interferences, the whole equation starts to explode. And it's a wonderful thing to watch and coach.
I love that. And yeah, you mentioned about interferences, for people. Do you find they're easy to discover within people, or sometimes they're maybe deeper kind of rooted blocks? I'd be fascinated to know from your work with people.
I always say sometimes you have to go scuba diving. Sometimes you just have to snorkel. But people have interference, which is unconscious patterns. And when we're children, we're programmed. And sometimes that program no longer serves us. So as a coach, my job is to marry the why and how. Why do we do what we do? And how do we get better? We know you can't break habits, so we have to build new ones. But when we start to understand why we behave the way we do, and now you couple that with new experiences, new techniques, and you start to move down the field accordingly, that why becomes more and more evident. So as opposed to sitting there and just really understanding why, you start to add some proper behavioral change, the why starts to really come out, whether it's in a dream, whether it's on a walk, whether it's on a conversation. But I think understanding that and really exploring that is very important. It's not the only thing, but for lasting changes, it's important to understand what kind of programming you had.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are kind of like, we're in the new year now, and people want to make these kind of like changes in terms of the classic, like the losing the weight and, you know, like eating healthy, exercising, all those kind of things. Yeah. What do you see as the kind of main challenge on why sort of people, you know, go back to their old patterns and that kind of thing?
Well, I think people think, we always say behavior changes before feelings. So I want to feel a certain way, then I'll do it. And what happens after a while when people don't feel a certain way, they revert back to old behavior because that's familiar. If you can tolerate not feeling great for a little bit and really be conscious of how you choose behavior, you look up X amount of, we always talk about stacking, like days, weeks, and months stack. And what happens then, time becomes an ally, meaning you look up 6 months later and wow, look at all these things I've accomplished. And on this side, when we're waiting to feel a certain way in order to change, time becomes a foe because now it's days, weeks, and months. We look back, we're at the same place. So I always tell people behavior before feelings. It doesn't have to be Herculean change, by the way. These small, and we all know it's all cliche, these small little shifts, small stacking of wins. It's just like how money compounds, behavior compounds. But you have to give yourself the opportunity to experience it. I can't guarantee where you're going to be, but on a qualitative level, it's going to look a lot different. Just a little bit. When you hear people, Johnny, I'm going to the gym 5 times it's January 1, going 5 times a week. I'm like, go once, right? Because what happens is when we set high expectations and our training is here, that's too much space. Start stacking wins so your training gets closer to your expectations, right? That's consistency. That's evidence building. That is sustainable. And then we can leverage that.
I remember,
and we all know it. Yeah.
I remember it just reminded me of something I read in Atomic Habits, James Clear, and he was talking about, he gave one of his clients a job to turn up to the gym. All he had to do was go for 5 minutes. And the guy hated the gym, but he told him just to turn up. And then the guy turned up, and then it turned into like gym sessions. But the guy started with the thought of like 45 minutes, an hour in the gym. Oh, like, and that really stopped him. But he gave him the objective to turn up, and it just kind of, yeah.
Now, he turns up. He's like, well, since I'm here, I might as well go work on the treadmill for 10 minutes. But that starts something. Motivation is very fleeting. And I'm not saying you need motivation, but you really need is momentum. And momentum doesn't have to be this huge boom. And in actuality, it shouldn't be a huge boom because then it's not sustainable. So you really want to slowly build something that builds a foundation. And a lot of people, unfortunately, want that immediate gratification, want the quick win. But what happens, though, is that all that happens if you give yourself the opportunity to go experience it. And then what happens is once you've done that and you start to build these behaviors, it starts to really build new networks in your brain. That's neuroplasticity. And what happens is all the energy that was needed to build that, once we had that in place, we could take that energy and stretch, right? That's growth. But you can't grow from a shaky foundation. You have to give yourself that consistency and watch what happens. Small stuff, take a walk for 20 minutes, right? Or feel an emotion and don't react. Create some mental space. Be aware of these things. Whatever you're trying to accomplish, set small intentions first. And by the way, I coach race car drivers, CEOs, high achievers, high decision makers. If we're trying to change, it doesn't have to be massive at first. It will build into that. And we read this in all these books. This is not like new way of thinking. But when you start to experience change, the momentum train really starts to kick in. I've seen it too many times. I've coached it too many times and I've experienced it too many times.
Yeah, creating those momentum and then experiencing the change and creating even more momentum. I love that. Evan, you mentioned about the feelings and not necessarily acting, even like despite the feelings sometimes, and don't want to do this or this is difficult kind of things. Are the feelings of people something you work with on your clients though, like separately on the side of,
these things they might be going through emotionally?
Well, emotions are a big part of my practice. So for me, emotions are just data, right? What happens is we get tied to emotions based on past behavior, because that's what the brain knows. But emotions, whether it's joy or panic or fear of whatever, it's an emotion. What happens is when we create mental space, we feel something, right? We don't put it on a shelf, we feel it. Say, I'm feeling nervous right now. All right, I'm allowed to feel nervous. Nobody's immune from that. You don't react to it. You create this mental space, whether it's a breath, give it space. It's okay, how do I need to behave right now? Obviously, we don't want to feel nervous and we don't want to feel certain things, but they're there. But it doesn't have to dictate how you behave, right? And once you choose behavior, the brain now experiences something different. We do that repetitiously. That's how behaviors are formed. We know you can't, breaking behavior is very difficult and it takes too much energy. What happens when you start to form new behaviors and you through repetition, that becomes now default, the energy used is in far greater value. So that's why these small steps are important. So now when we feel nervous, we're not worried we're going to react because we've really conditioned ourselves to create space, to choose behavior. And then what happens, ironically, down the line is the intensity, the duration, and the frequency of being nervous is less and less and less, right? Because we're not attached to that emotion, because we know we have proof now, we have evidence now of how we can use it. Like I was on Wall Street for almost 25 years. My assistant used to look at me, he goes, how do you feel? I go, very nervous. He's like, you're always nervous. He goes, but you don't behave like that. I go, that's conditioning, right? And when nervousness to me, like I just did a TED talk, it's important to me because it means something. But I don't react to it. I can respond to it differently. That's the whole thing. That's why you can't make a decision without an emotion. You just can't. I mean, that is science 101, but it doesn't have to dictate it, right? We always say when I work with athletes or anybody, once your emotions get on the field, we got a problem. We need emotions. I mean, there's some great stuff out of Stanford. There's so many different universities and research labs have come. Of course you do, but we have such power to choose. To me, that's very rewarding.
To choose what we do with them. You touched on old, like, breaking behaviors can be quite a lot of energy, you touched on, in a way. So am I understanding you right? And let me know if not, that if you're trying to get rid of something that, I don't know, maybe it's like too much drinking or eating the wrong stuff and that kind of thing, it's better to look at creating a new behavior instead of that.
Well, the brain doesn't know can and can't, right? We've heard this many a times. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to eat this, Doesn't know the difference. And the attention's there, as opposed to, what does drinking water look like in this environment? What does sobriety feel like? Or what would it be if I had salad instead of that? Let me try that. So the focus is different, right? So your energy is in a different place now. So now we're able to not, I don't want to, I can't, I won't, I shouldn't. What would this feel like? What would this behavior do for me? And so all of a sudden your energy is in a different spot. I don't want to eat pizza. I don't want to do this. What would a walk feel like after I had a salad? So now we're in the world of curiosity, right? You've heard of, everybody knows about curiosity. Curiosity is just information seeking. That's what it is in its essence. So I'm curious to see what would it look like if I did this? So now in psychoanalysis, we have something called resistance, right? When we talk about past behaviors, there's why do we do what we do? Some of it's so deep rooted. So when we think about curiosity, it's, what would it look like if I did this? It's a softer approach, but what it happens is it really opens up, let me go see. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if it does, it does. See what happens. So we're not demanding on ourselves. So as we become more curious about behavior change, right? Putting those together, watch what happens. You can't demand things. Like people say, I command myself or some garbage like that. What would it look like if I worked out twice a week and instead of that third slice of pizza, I had a salad instead of this? But it's one of those things where, so you start to think now, and this is all science stuff. This isn't like hocus pocus stuff. What would it look like? Well, we know it would feel good if you could do something that's rewarding for yourself and that's not harmful. I hear a lot about waking up early. What would it look like if I went to bed earlier? What would my mornings look like? Right? Because you hear about people waking up, I wake up early, you can get a lot done. Let me go see. As opposed to, I'm waking up every single day at 5 a.m. I'm going to bed at every night at 10 o'clock at night. That's it. Because we know what happens sometimes. You go to bed at 11, you wake up at 7. And now what you just do, you disappointed yourself. right? Because your
Curiosity.
belief system's not there,
Mm.
right? Because you haven't done it in the past. So you start to build up this evidence, and there goes your beliefs. Wait a second, I've done this before. I've done that. What would it look like if I did that? And now you start, like we just said earlier, now you start stacking behavior and it compounds.
I like that approach of getting curious and then looking at, oh, what would it look like, and adding things in rather than being like, get rid of this, and this, and that approach. It kind of leads me on to another question a bit, because I've heard like people connecting me off the podcast and things like that, and on socials and stuff, beating themselves up for when they've like fallen into a bad behavior. I was doing so well, and now I've fallen back into like this bad activity or behavior. What's your approach to that? Because people can have quite, and I've been there as well, quite like negative self-talk when they fall off the horse, as to say.
Nobody's immune to that. Nobody,
Mm.
right? So just knowing that is not an excuse, but saying, all right, this just happened. I have a choice here, right? So, beating yourself up is quite useless. We all know that, but we do it anyway. And so I'm not immune to it either. All right, what do I need to do now? All right, let me start again. But what happens is it starts to build up this resilience. And it's not an excuse that we're not perfect, right? Because if you're perfect, you're done growing. But it's not an excuse that we can just keep screwing up,
Mm.
right? How do I get better from here and continue again? If that is your mindset, right? There's, excellence without excuses. All right, it didn't go the way we wanted to, or we sabotaged ourselves, or whatever it may be. All right, take a breath. Where do you need to be right now? And that goes into a different world of self-exploratory questions. You've heard about these. When we ask ourselves questions, it puts us in the seat of influence for ourselves. So instead of reacting, like I'll say it to myself, TEDx talk was business is getting big, but okay, I feel overwhelmed, right? And I almost want to curl up. All right, Ev, what do you need to do right now for the next hour? Right? It's a feeling. So I don't want this feeling onto the field. Oh, I suck. I can't believe I did that again. I'm no good. All right, hold off. All right, you can acknowledge that. You can kick a little dirt. Where do I need to be right now? Let me go take a walk. Let me have a phone call with somebody. Watch what happens. All of a sudden, those emotions and that negative stuff is gone. And now we're refocused on what we should be doing. So what we've done in the past, even that one little screw up, is not for naught. We learned something. That's building. So why should that moment destroy everything? We know life's not linear, which is not an excuse, but sometimes you have to go 3 and take a step back. You're still in an upward trajectory, but we lose sight of the forest through the trees, and whatever that saying is. Like, don't lose sight of the big picture, please. Keep going, right? You're not starting at square one because you've learned a lot, but we just throw everything out, right? We all know this. We've all felt this. We've all done this. But when you start, like self-compassion, okay, take a breath. Take a breath. Where do I need to be right now? It stops that catastrophe. You can just go down and down on these fractals, right? To say, hold up, man, hold up. Where do I need to be? And by the way, that's for anyone. We are our worst critics, but we also be your biggest fan. That's possible also. When people read all these self-help books, I said, the first one you read, the 900 read, they're all the same, all have the same core tenets. You have to go experience this. And once you start to experience what quote unquote discipline or routine, I like to use the word structure, everything you read now is additional because you believe in what you're doing, right? When I start to work with you, I call it a book self-help detox. No more, right? No more self-help books until we get this down. And then it's value added.
So much information that, there's so much information. And yeah, definitely in my introduction into self-help, it was very much like reading loads of books and kind of just reading until I started implementing it. So definitely been guilty of that, right?
Right. If you're not getting enough sleep, you're not going to bed at the right time, waking up, I exercise in the morning, exercise, which is acute stress, taking care of yourself, giving yourself space, getting outside, getting sunlight. If you're not doing any of those things, those are free. None of this really matters, but we all know this. So once you start to build that, whether it's 5 minutes in a gym or whatever book you read, count to 5, you start to believe it because now you have exhibited behavior that you believe in. You actually are starting to move your own needle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And starting
And then,
small.
we always say you got to slow down in order to speed up. Slowing down has nothing to do with gas. It's the art of intentionality. Be intentional as you start to build, because then it goes like that. I don't know how long the base looks like, but that's just building. And then you go.
And like you said, there's a few things that come into my mind there. You were saying about, sleep, exercising, drinking water and stuff like that. But what you were saying earlier as well was like, just starting small, because people's minds can get overwhelmed sometimes.
And they don't think much can happen if you start small,
Mm.
right? And I get that. Listen, I'm a Wall Street guy. I was an athlete. I'm like, screw that. We're going big. Let's go big, right? I get that, but it's not sustainable, right? And this is such a wonderful way to create growth because, like I said earlier, it doesn't have to be Herculean. How wonderful is that? And you could still, the byproduct is going to be what it's going to be, is going to be what you want to accomplish. This is just a different way of doing it.
Building it. You, Evan, have like kind of a very good, as a coach, it doesn't surprise me, is like, helping people their performance. Really great way of kind of perspective and asking the right questions rather than be like, "Oh, why did I mess up?" Or "Oh, what have I done wrong now?" It's like, what do I need to adjust? Or what could this mean? Or what would that look like? Is there a way that you've trained yourself for thinking in that way over time, like any kind of practice?
It's interesting. I just did a TED talk about something called post-traumatic growth. And I was a lacrosse player and I blew my knees out twice.
Mm.
And that was my identity. And it completely destroyed me. And I didn't want anybody to see it. And I didn't deal with it for 15, 20 years. And it was always nagging me, like, you're not good enough. You could have been this stuff. But like, I'm 53. Nobody spoke about emotions. Like, put those things on a shelf and just get bigger and shut up. But what happened was I knew something was wrong. It was coming out if we were drinking too much or sabotage, all these things. I'm like, something is fundamentally wrong here. And it took me till I was about 36, 37 to realize and go speak to somebody that I'm dealing with pain and trauma that I'm unconsciously unwilling to deal with. But it keeps showing up in can I curse once on this show or no?
Yeah, no, totally
It
cool.
keeps showing up in fucking behavior. Something is fucking wrong. And it took me to put a spotlight on it and said, you know what? My brain is not operating the way it should. I am living in such fear. And then I spoke to somebody like, okay, what are you going to do? So what do you mean what I'm going to do? And then it's just these small steps started to happen. Take a walk, Kev. Down regulate. Talk. What happens is if you don't talk about things, it stays in darkness. And in darkness, it could pick up any narrative it wants. That is a dangerous place to be. When we speak, pain loses power because it's right in front of us. Now we know, listen, do we know exactly what to do with it? No, but it's here now. It's right in front of us. It's all right. It's all right to feel hurt. It's all right to have trauma, whatever it is, but verbalize it. And once you're able to be honest with yourself, and we know now, like 2019, we talk about mental health all the time. There is a holistic wealth movement going on, quality of life, all these things, but 90% is mental. We all have dealt with, there's different degrees of trauma. There's different degrees of hurt and pain, but you know what? That's your story. It doesn't need to be compared to somebody else's. However, it has to be recognized and acknowledged. And I think that's where growth starts. Is it easy? No, of course it's not. But does it give you freedom? Absolutely. Right? Don't compare your trauma or your pain to somebody else's. This is your story. And that's for any overachiever, it doesn't even matter where you are. If you're starting to be honest with yourself, when we talk about curiosity and we talk about growth and all these other things, it gives you such a better advantage. Because if you don't do that, you live in what? Victimhood. And being in victimhood is a very scary place to be because now that's your choice.
Yeah, it's crazy how I found in my journey, it's crazy how much I'd have to catch myself out for being in victimhood, not to like a severe degree, but be like, oh, why does this happen? Oh, this is tough, all that kind of thing. And then really catch myself on that language.
Listen, people are victims in things. I'm not dismissing that one bit. But when you choose to be in victimhood, that's your problem. So if you're the problem, you can be the solution. That's invigorating.
It's that language and kind of the questions you've been talking to us about.
Words matter. All this stuff, it's nobody's immune to the human experience. Life is not linear, but it could be extremely rewarding. It doesn't have to be a punishment. Give yourself that space. Have a moment. If something's wrong, kick a little dirt. That's all right. But then make a choice. That's mental performance, right? The more you do it, not that you become cold, but you start to really build this framework of how you go about doing things. It's a lot healthier. And what happens is it starts to build mental resilience. It starts to build mental fortitude. It starts to build mental strength. Once again, you're not immune to things, but how you recover, reset, and move is completely different. When I coach, not only just, traders and portfolio, I coach a lot of different other professions. But when you think of the world of finance, the feedback loop is so fast, right? You can feel all the emotions in an hour. But what happens if you keep reacting to these emotions, right? That's reacting. It's called impulsivity. So how do we get guys to make best decisions? Remember, it's not the right decision. You're right. That takes time. Time will only tell that. But if you start living in the world of best decision making, you have pretty good odds, right? But you imagine having all this input constant and your own emotions, right? You have the external, the internal. How do you create that space to make, and you're dealing with in the markets uncertainty. How do you become comfortable with uncertainty and confident in your behavior? Ooh, that's training. Sounds like a lot. And again, it's scary. Small steps. First, you have to acknowledge it.
I'm glad you come on to decision making, because that was something I really wanted to talk to you about from, coming from that trading world, and that being a real decisions being pretty critical. That I also know a lot of people, and I've been in definitely obviously as a human being in it as well, where it's we find it hard to make the best decisions for ourselves, whether it's a job, career, relationship, or kind of the next move in life. So I'd like to just go back to best decision versus right decision and kind of just really understand that again.
Well, one thing I want to say is, and this is going to be very freeing, is that nobody is fearless. No one. Nobody. They just know how to use it differently. So when we talk about best decisions, that's actually taking external input and internal input and making a decision, right? Recognizing both. So when we say best decisions, that is also called conscious choice. I'm going to consciously decide to do this, given all my external inputs, the internal inputs. I want to put that together, create space, and create a decision. Listen, nothing is certain. We may be wrong, but you start to build that best decision muscle. More times than not, you'll be right. Right? Because you make a decision. I can't tell you what's going to happen later. Right? Who knows? Right? There's so many things that are out of my control after that. Right? They just are. But that doesn't dismiss that I have the ability to make the best decisions I can. I also invest in companies. Dude, I've had some doozies. I thought I made the best decision with the inputs I had, reading the environment, having an experience, and it didn't work. Over time, I was proven wrong. All right, that happens. What did I get wrong? How can I see it differently next time? Where do I see improvement in this? Right? I still think it was a very good decision at the time. But as time played out, it turned out not to be. And I've had good ones also, right? But I wasn't impulsive in making them. That's the difference. Because what happens is when you're impulsive and you're all over the place, you can't tweak anything. You don't know what to get better at because you're all over the map, right? You can't tweak inconsistency. And consistency in decision making is extremely important. It's true, right?
I think I want to ask that because a lot of time I hear this, I want to make the right decision. I got to get the right decision. And yeah, like you were kind of touching on, nothing certain. But there's the internal and there's the external input, and you can gather that and feedback from making the moves and moving forward from decisions in the past.
Yeah, and your odds get better. I can't create certainty. I have no idea. But I've experienced, I've slowed down the process. I've looked at the externals and the internals, and this is my best decision. And when you're wrong, we already said when you're right, but when you're wrong, what should I see next time? And sometimes it was the best decision. It just didn't work. But to have that moment of reflection and not rumination, right? Ruminating is a behavior, by the way. Reflect, say, how do I need to get better here? So when I coach anybody, if something's going on, I say, let's just take a proverbial step back. How was I feeling and why? And does anything need to change in this moment? Probably the answer could be no. But if there is something to change, what needs to change? Where do we need to get better? That's a great place to be. So where does my energy go now? Not getting worse, but getting better. Now, by the way, I'm not a fan of positive psychology. I think it's massively toxic. But I think having a positive attitude and how you reframe things, because we know energy is real, we know how the brain works for me.
Reframing.
You got to acknowledge it's all right to feel whatever you want. Obviously, you think you made the best decision that didn't work out. You're obviously not going to be jumping for joy like a lucky leprechaun. Right? Have a moment, feel what you want to feel, create mental space. Okay, where do I need to be? where in that decision could I have been better? Isn't that better building than, hey, Evan, you're an idiot. You're not capable of doing this. Where in the past, obviously, I've made some good decisions. So am I going to really go down that route? For what reason? So once you start, you see yourself doing this and wait, whoa, have your moment. But where do you need to be? Not positive psychology. Reframe, reset.
Not just brushing it off. Just taking a moment to reflect and ask those questions, it sounds like, for you.
Yeah, because it puts you in that seat of influence, right? It's not like shit happens. I hate that line. Do things happen? Yes. But have that moment of reflection. Where do I need to get better? You know, I have clients write down, because, I think journal is important because it creates conscious behavior. What did I do well today? And where do I need to get better? I don't care if you ate a beautiful breakfast. That's all you did well today. So be it. But where do we need to get better is if we were impulsive, not say, I'm not going to be impulsive. That's not getting better. I want to be able to feel my emotions better and create mental space. I like that answer, right? Are we ignoring how? No, we just said we acknowledge it. But as we, you know what feedback is. This is feed forward. Like, I know what I did wrong. So how do I need to get better? My attention doesn't have to be on what I do wrong, because not everything I do wrong. But the attention to be, where do I need to get better? That neurologically, Johnny, in the brain is real. It's real. Goes back to what we were discussing, habit formation, which builds experiences, which builds new neural networks in the brain. Boom. That's where we want to be. Again and again and again and again and again.
Again.
It takes effort.
How can someone practice this art of best decision making for them?
It's interesting. So before I started my own company, I worked with this woman at a group, and it's really becomes this belief that we can make better decisions. So I'm a big thermogenesis guy, which means that saunas and ice plunges and cold and all this type of stuff, because I know it's acute stress and it's very healthy for you. I've been taking cold showers for 10 plus years. I hate it every day. But for me, it's a belief that even though I don't want it, I know it's a good decision to do, I don't want to do it. So I literally put myself in a cold shower every morning. Let me preface by, I do take a sauna, so I cheat a little bit because I like my sauna time also. But I put myself in that shower. I don't want to do it. I don't. But I know it's a good decision. But what happens is I have that moment for 1 minute of deep breath, really centering myself, because you hit that fight or flight. And just centering. Okay, where do I need to be? Take a breath, Evan. Take a breath. That 1 minute or minute and a half is crucial for me. We know neurologically it's very good for you, but for me, it sets the stage for better decisions. Right now, listen, I know people who listen to be like, I don't want to do that. Then say, you know what? Let me go walk for 30 minutes in the morning. That's a very good decision to make. So we start stacking best decisions, even though you don't want to. Maybe raining, it's a little cold out. Let me go for a walk. That goes right back to what we were talking about. Now you start stacking. We talked about mental space. Well, behavior also is acknowledging how you feel. I have 2 daughters who are 15 and 13. When they were younger, my little one would get under my skin. How can an 11-year-old make me react? I'm 50 at the time. It's not her, it's something else that's triggering me. So for me, the best decision is to take a breath and not react. But that breath is a behavior because I'm acknowledging what's going on. So when we talk about when we talk about making best decisions, we know emotions are involved. So when we're emotional, create mental space. Ask a question. Okay, where do I need to be right now? What kind of decision do I have ahead of me? Once you do that, you're in a different state of mind already. You are no longer in fight or flight. You are in rest and digestion, right? The sympathetic to the parasympathetic. Wonderful place to make a decision. Once again, we're never all going to be right, but you have a better odds of being right than you have of being wrong. Just like that. Now the thing is, you got to remind yourself to do this, right? Because you've been doing the same thing over and over again for years and years and years, right? You've conditioned yourself the other way. So whether you set an alarm on your watch, on your phone, or whatever it is, or in the morning, you have a routine. It starts just like that, right? You can't wake up and say, I'm only making best decisions. How are you going to do that? It's setting structure.
Just starting.
I've been doing this for decades, right? And I'm getting better at it, right? I'm not perfect, but it's definitely something I think about and I reflect on. So I put myself in situations that are, not high risk, but I put myself in places where I'm very uncomfortable. I want to be able to feel my emotions. TEDx, for example, you get very nervous. I know it means a lot, right? Fear of judgment, fear of embarrassment, fear of failure, fear of rejection. They're all there. Put me there. I want to be there. Now, I'm not walking in like I have no issue with anything. Of course, I'm feeling it all, but I know I'm going to get better. Because as I get on bigger and bigger stages, this conditioning is important for me. So do not run away for it. You know, when we talk about when you're able to turn toward what you fear as opposed to away from it, there's so much work done and study done about how you become stronger, but just not into like strong in relationships and the way you see life and how you perceive things changes. So it's a cliche for a reason. I'm not saying put yourself on the top of a cliff and hang there with your fingernails. That is stupidity. Put yourself, we all know it, but if you don't experience it, you don't know it. It's all just words then. Put yourself in a cold shower and see how that feels. You're going to run out. You're going to get, no, Johnny, don't have that guy on ever again. He's an idiot. It's nothing to do with the benefits, which there are a lot. It's something you don't want to do, but you did it anyway. Most of my clients take cold showers for years because to them, it's a positive trigger. We know what negative triggers are. It's a positive trigger to set the day where their intention right. That's why I do it also. And I hate it, just to give you a heads up.
You still hate it, yeah.
I still hate it.
Many done it for a very long time. I like that. I like some of the things you gave, really valuable points around decision making, you know, getting into that parasympathetic state where possible, and then starting the day off with a best decision for you to sort of build on momentum and putting yourself in these uncomfortable environments where possible, but not stupidity. We're not talking the cliff thing, obviously.
Yeah, and start small. You know, if you're in an office and you have a fear of public speaking and that causes you anxiety, say, you know what? I'm going to speak up at the next boardroom meeting. I'm going to feel extremely anxious. That's all right. So now as Johnny's about to step into the boardroom, say something, he's heating up, anxiety's coming like, ooh, I feel anxious right now. All right, what do I want to do right now? Just the acknowledgement alone. I'm not saying you're never going to feel anxiety because that's not true, but you know how to use it now. And then what happens, all of a sudden you deliver a beautiful speech or whatever, comment or whatever you did, right? And you're done, you're like, that wasn't that bad. That one thing could change everything because it changes your belief because you have evidence now that you can do it. Take that in relationship. You could take that across the board, run it through the garden, right?
Something small. That's a good one to add on a theme as we've been talking about today, or you've been talking about.
There's no lack of opportunity to do this, right? So many different places you could practice this, and it builds a strong mental foundation because it's not fake belief. You have evidence behind it. So what happens when we're waiting to do things massive and we don't do it, time becomes a foe. Small things, watch what happens. I had a client of mine, he was telling me that he had a competition, this is like 4 years ago, that they had to do 10,000 steps a day. And so him and my other client, they were just telling me a story. I did a workshop in Arizona and they had their Fitbits. Remember the Fitbits?
Yeah.
It's like, and they would walk on a treadmill because they're very competitive. And then he realized that he couldn't get too many steps, so he had to go run. He never ran more than a half a mile. This guy's done 7 marathons. He started this 4 years ago. Since 7, he just got into Boston, which is very hard to get into. Like this started with these two great guys challenging and betting each other, and they don't want to be embarrassed to do 10,000 steps. The guy realized he didn't have enough time, so he had to run. But then look what happened to momentum. He's in incredible shape now. He's doing marathons. And if he ever told the sir, how did that start? He goes, I have a funny story for you. This is how it began.
Transformation. Just turning into a marathon runner.
Imagine the discipline that he built and the belief system he built. He's done many other things in the last 4 years. But was it from that little bet with some? Possibly. And what was it? The fear of embarrassment. So the fear of his embarrassment, he chose to choose something different, not to stop and lie and not do anything. He said, you know what, I'm going to go run. So the fear of embarrassment actually helped him.
Yeah. Bill, he used it.
Yeah.
Used it in that way. Powerful choice. Evan, I know you've got a ton more success with your clients and you're giving a lot of value in many ways, and you shared so many golden nuggets today, especially into the new year where people thinking about making a change and how they do these kind of things. So yeah, I'd love to know as we kind of wrap up today where the listener can find you, to reach out, maybe work with you and your team, find out some more of your resources. And finally, is there maybe a final point you want to leave us with today from everything we've talked about?
You know, it's one of these things like once we start to trust ourselves is a big deal. right? But trust has to be earned. Believe it or not, and I want to say again, this is all science backed. These small little shifts, behavior can create such compounding effects. I know we don't want to believe it because we want just big change, but it creates such a strong foundation. Trust me. As you trust yourself, trust me that this is true, and give yourself permission to go experience that. However small you want to start, just like this guy with a Fitbit. Now he's doing the Boston Marathon, which God never ran more than a half a mile unless he was being chased. Give yourself that opportunity. And then 3 months from now, send Johnny a text and say, I got to tell you what I did, and share your stories with us. Watch what happens. Doesn't matter what you do for a living or who you are or where you are, whatever your situation is. Think of the guy with the Fitbit who's running the Boston Marathon. True story. Blew me away. And he's a wonderful individual. Where you can find me, my team, I have a wonderful marketing team and a great support team. It's m1performancegroup.com. We have insights and blog posts and a lot of videos, and we have some great media from podcasts we've been on. We're also in the beginning of May, we're rolling out something called the M1 Mental Trading Academy, which is a 6-week course on some of the stuff we're discussing. It's a little focused on trading, but it's really building a strong mental mindset and a mental model to actually know how to deal with markets and yourself. So that's coming out in May. And we just did a TEDx, which should be out in a couple of weeks. So you can go see it on the site. It was a lot of fun to do. And we have a lot of speeches coming up. So we're really busy at M1. And it's Evan Marks on LinkedIn, eMarks72 on Instagram. We're all over the place.
Amazing. So many places. And so much going on, and wow, the blog post, the speeches, everything like that. So Evan's website and Evan's links will be in the show notes below, so you can reach out and grab some of his amazing work and look at like how him and his team can support you more. So yeah, thank you, Evan, for everything you're doing for the world and everything you've shared today. I really appreciated you being
Johnny,
here.
I really appreciate you giving me the platform. It was a pleasure to meet you, and I hope we can do this again.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Amazing. So that concludes our episode for today. And remember to lead with your heart and not with fear.